So Tez, most people think that rowing. Let's start over, actually.
Just jump in whenever you'd like.
Yep. Okay. So Tez, most people think that storms would be the hardest, scariest part of crossing the ocean. But I'm curious, based on your opinion and your experience, what was harder, the storms or all of the time in between?
It was actually neither. I noticed that my internal experience reflected the external conditions. And I was constantly trying to separate those things. But so often when a storm raged outside, it wasn't the storm that actually presented the risks. It was the storm inside of me.
Ah.
And sometimes those storms would show up in unexpected ways also in the calm days.
So it sounds a lot like that, Hermetic law of correspondence, where your outer world's a reflection of your inner world. And in your situation, there was no outer world as far as other people besides you. So did you get to really feel that, embody it, and then make changes and shift it in the moment?
I tried to. It was a journey every single day to choose what I focused on. And some days it was easier than others. And some days it really just came back to trying to take a breath, reassuring myself that I'm okay, take another stroke. And other times I would just shout into the wind.
Amazing, amazing. And you realized the wind had a consciousness. And it said, hey, what do you want?
It was shouting back.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, I'm really blessed in this situation because this is a long time coming. And, I like to say that most people imagine that the hardest thing of crossing a storm is the chaos and the danger. But what I've learned in most situations is that the real test isn't the edge, it's the stretch. And it's really, in life, the long middle, the pauses between the huge ups and the huge downs, which is why I was like, man, you are the perfect person to talk about rapid harmony, not in the middle of chaos, but through the long haul. And so today I'm joined by Tez Steinberg, a record-setting ocean rower, entrepreneur, and explorer of human potential, who became the only person to row solo from California to Hawaii as a first crossing, and then solo nonstop from Hawaii to Australia. Whew. Now, his journey was shaped by surviving depression, the loss of his father to suicide, and a heart attack at 34. It has earned the recognition of the Explorers Club, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Nexus, which is where we met, the Summit Series, and the World Economic Forum, which named Tez one of the 50 best young minds in the world for his leadership and impact. So this conversation isn't about adventure. It's about what happens when nothing is happening and you still have to stay present, regulated, and self-trusting. Well, first off, Tez, I'm really glad you're here.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be with you.
And it's not about just being here. It's knowing that you were off in the abyss and you are still here. It's a pretty amazing experience. I'd like to hear a little bit, I guess, to start about the inspiration, right? It's not like you were a lifetime rower, hanging out in 24-hour fitness, pedaling every day, trying to beat your PRs. You just said, hey, I have this spark, and this was almost your version of building the ark. And I'm curious, what sparked that originally?
I was actually at a film festival, and I saw a film about a woman who rode around the world, and I walked out of that theater that night and was curious. I Googled, how long would it take to row across an ocean? You see, when I saw that film, it was a few months after my father had died by suicide. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was looking for something to pour myself into. When I heard about ocean rowing, it spoke to me because, honestly, I just wanted to be alone in the middle of the ocean. But I also knew that you don't just show up and row across an ocean. There's a long journey that forces you to grow in so many ways just to start. And I knew that learning to do this kind of a project would help me heal from my father's death and up-level in business and life.
So what before you left, what did you think that this would teach you? Like specifically, you're like, okay, I want to up-level in my life, but what was going through your head as far as, this is going to teach me here? Or did you think this is going to heal me? What was going through your mind?
My background's in social entrepreneurship. I like to use business as a force to make the world a better place. And ocean rowing is expensive. I didn't have the means to buy a boat, to fund a whole campaign. So when I looked at this end to end, pulling it off financially would require me to create a brand, create a compelling story, raise sponsorship, raise donations from the public for this thing I'm rowing for. And so I decided to create a nonprofit called United World Challenge and use my first expedition to raise scholarships to a school that changed my life, a school called United World College. And so it helped me with storytelling, with branding, with marketing, with speaking, with writing, and through those things, a belief in myself as well.
So time-wise, a lot of this catalyst was the loss of your dad.
That's right.
How did this affect you as far as purpose goes and shifting that attention as you're going through the grieving process away from you into something bigger?
Look, the part of the motivation when he died, the realization was life is short, right? We could be gone tomorrow. And so I wanted to do something really special, something that was a celebration. To me, it was a celebration of life, to be able to go do something that seems absolutely impossible, that's a beautiful thing to experience. And in terms of purpose, to try to use that to help a little bit. And so as someone who had never been to sea, was not a rower, was not a sailor, if such a person could figure it out, climb in a boat and row across the ocean, maybe that story could be meaningful to other people in some way and help them find their ocean. So that sort of became my purpose, is doing something seemingly impossible for myself in a way and hopefully inspire a couple of people along the way.
I love it. And I want to dig a little into moments of fear along the journey, because I feel like a lot of fear is this fear of the unknown, ends up creating so much, this fear, this uncertainty energy, right? Which is what makes people grasp onto things that may not serve them anymore, from
That's right.
politics to their religion to, you name it, to all the faux pas we can never talk about. So you had to let go of all certainty going out into the ocean. What was that experience like? What did you feel, and when did you realize that like everything that I'm certain about is now, off the table?
Immediately, I had hoped to get months to train in my boat for the first row from California to Hawaii. And just as the boat was finished being built, after 3 years of fundraising and building this boat from scratch that would keep me safe, just as it was finished, the world shut down. It was spring 2020. So I ended up with just enough time to do 3 days of training in a shallow bay, tow the boat from Washington, where it was built, down to California, pack it up and push off before the seasonal window in which you could do something like this passed, and I'd have to wait a year. And so when I rowed out from Monterey at midnight, July 3rd, 2020, I had only spent 3 nights in the boat. I knew nothing. And when the sun came up on day 1, I knew immediately I was out of my element. Like, it was so disorienting. These little tiny, I'm talking like 1 to 2 foot waves, they'd come at the boat. It was super calm conditions that day. And I was like, well, how is the boat going to respond? Because it was bigger than anything I'd seen.
Right.
3 days later, there was actually real weather. 25 knot winds, big rolling 10-foot waves, and then breaking 10-foot waves. And at that point, I realized I'm in way over my head, and honestly wanted to find any way to quit and come back to land.
Wow. So you're in this moment. You'd probably watched Castaway at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I had, this is tragic. I'm forgetting his
Wilson?
name. Thank you. Gosh,
Yeah.
I'm a bit
I just
embarrassed.
saw the
I'm
movie
a bit
like about a
embarrassed.
week ago.
I had Wilson on the boat. He was sitting behind me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you have some pretty good conversations?
Honestly, he didn't say much. I did most of the talking, so he didn't make the cut for the second row.
On this moment, and you're sitting here and you're like, okay, this is 1 to 2 inch waves. This is interesting. I've got a little certainty with this now, and then bam, you get hit with some really big stuff. Did you reach out? Did you try to connect? Did you use your technology? Like, where were you at? Because I know you had a support team in this all, but nobody there on the boat to row with you. Like, where was there some moments where you're like, okay, this this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah, correct. So I'll give first some orientation.
Give me
So
a
it's a
little
23-foot rowboat, solar panels, battery system, all of that powers my navigation, communication, and most of all, my water maker, desalinator. Pack everything I need, and for that California to Hawaii row, packed 90 days of food. And there's no support boat, no chase boat, nobody with me. So on day 3, when I am unable to control the boat in these rough seas, I throw a para anchor to stabilize the boat and hopefully not capsize. And at that point, I'm figuring out how can I manage the situation. I spend the next 5 days inside of my cabin, riding out these rough seas. Finally, on day 7, conditions calm enough for me to pull the para anchor. And what I do that day is actually contact my boat builder. And she did something amazing. She was like, "Do you want to quit?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to quit." And she normalized it. She said, "That's all right. I won't judge you. But if you can, try to have an open mind." And on the other hand, if she had said, "Dig deep, you've got this," that wouldn't have been a message that resonated at all, right? But she gave me a little bit of space to say, "Hey, make your own decision. Just try to have an open mind. Go out and try and row for the day if you can," right? And so contacting the boat builder, she was my duty officer and my number one contact, but also my family, right? I'm sending text messages on sat phones, and as I got more comfortable, sometimes the message cadence would drop, but in those early days, was definitely leaning a lot on my friends and family.
So, for context, how long did it take you from start to finish as far as the rowing process went?
Actual on the water?
Yeah, actual on the water days.
71 days from California to Hawaii. Yeah, 71 days.
You made it through those first 5. Let's fast forward a little bit to we're past the uncertainty of, am I going to get thrashed off this thing? This is going to be destroyed? Because if you're watching this as a movie, if I was sitting there, like, I'd be paying really good attention. I wouldn't be talking to my wife. I wouldn't be eating popcorn. I'd be glued. And I want to bring it into the middle. The parts where if this was a movie, I'd be like, okay, can we get through this part? But for you, it was day in, day out. And for me, like when I did a Vision Quest, which was 4 days out there, time shifted. The illusion of time started changing, and each day started to feel like a month. Now you're expanding this out to 70 plus days. What did you do when it came to the mind as far as, when the novelty started to disappear and this idea of like a finish line becomes abstract? You're like, I don't know, I'm somewhere here out in the middle of the ocean. Like, how did you handle that mentally?
That first month was the hardest month of my life. I would wake up in the morning more often than not crying, just so scared and not believing in myself. It felt like I would never make it. There are no mile markers, no landmarks, no external reference points that I'm making progress. It's only these abstract, surreal numbers as I tick off degrees, minutes and degrees of that long. And it really became a journey of trusting this will one day end. And what's wild is as I approached Hawaii, that whole experience reversed from being like, when will I get off this boat, to being like, oh my gosh, I actually am now enjoying the experience. I found this inner belief that I would actually make it. I ended up fixing something that was plaguing me for a month, a broken rowing seat. And for a month, from day 15 to 45, was fiddling with the seat every day. And some days I didn't row at all. And I was just wondering, will this end up leaving me stranded in the middle of the ocean? What happened on day 45 is I took plastic and I cut it into little strips, put it in my camp stove, boiled water, and remade bearings by hand to replace the bearings that ground to dust from this off-kilter seat and this equipment failure. And when I put those handmade bearings into the seat and it worked, a flip switched. A switch flipped.
Yeah.
I did it in my language too. A flip
Well, it
switched.
flipped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is it. Whether this is the fix or another fix, I will figure it out in one way or another. I'll make it to Hawaii. And from that point forward, I was loving it. And as I got closer to the finish, I was actually sad. And when I finally made it to Hawaii after 71 days, I literally hesitated to step off the boat because I had fallen in love with being at sea and the beauty of the ocean and this experience of being a witness to this powerful force that drives our planet on an environmental level and that we all frankly come from.
Yeah.
And spending months drinking the ocean, this desalinated water, catching a fish and eating sashimi that grew from the ocean. That fish was the ocean. It never knew anything but the ocean. And having it just after it came out of the water, I felt like I was becoming the ocean.
Yeah.
And as I reached Hawaii, it was really a question of how do I integrate this? And the big takeaway for me was that there's no way I can show anyone what it's like out there. The only thing I can do is try to embody what I felt from the ocean and be that for other people and bring the ocean back to land through who I am.
That's beautiful and absolutely resonates because a lot of people look at the process of transformation as preparation, experience, integration, and their definition of integration is we talked about it for a few hours. They do that with psychedelics, they do it with consciousness, they do it after retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they don't understand the process of integration at all. The idea of really, be the change you want to see in the world kind of concept. And so kind of working this conversation a little backwards from that integration standpoint, as you're in that place of like, I need to embody and be the ocean that I know I am that same consciousness and it is a part of one of me. How was that at first experience? When you came back, you're off the land, you're having conversations with people. Did it feel as awkward as Tom Hanks in Castaway trying to have a conversation with someone when you'd only been talking to little Wilson for 72 days and talking to the wind?
It's surreal. It's surreal. It's like being born again, stepping onto land, the physical 3D reality, the luxuries, all these things that we take for granted. But most of all, what happened in my 71 days from California to Hawaii, it was a process of shedding armor. We put armor on every day to manage the pains of the world, right? We numb ourselves from, there's so much input. And not just armor, but we desensitize ourselves to the sounds and the sights. And there's so much information coming at us all the time that we have to filter out. On the ocean, all of that information is rich and meaningful. The sound is the wind and the waves, and it's telling me what I need to pay attention to. All of these experiences were things I listened to deeply, and coming back to land, it was a very painful experience. Seeing planes crossing the sky. So this was summer 2020, right? I crossed the ocean at a time when there was the least air traffic that there had been in decades. So I went like 6 weeks without even seeing a plane across the sky, right? At times, the people nearest to me were aboard the International Space Station, okay? And so when I come back to land, it's fall 2020. The U.S. is covered in forest fires. Colorado's in a massive drought. We're battling this pandemic still. And I was walking around seeing all of this plastic everywhere in our daily life, and it was super painful, to be honest. And from an integration perspective, I felt incomplete because I felt like the best version of myself at the end of the row, and then coming back to land, rather than integrate, it was almost a re-normalization of old habits to be able to cope with this difficult world. And that's part of why I decided to go back to sea a second time.
Fascinating. So that helped lead you back to sea so that you could escape the 3D, or so you could learn a little bit more about remembering who you are so that you can then bring that back here.
100% the second part.
Yeah.
It was very much I did an imperfect integration from that first row. And I saw an outrageous amount of ocean plastic in that first row. And as I took off more and more armor and felt more open-hearted throughout those 71 days, I also saw more and more trash. And it was heartbreaking. right? I got to Hawaii seeing so much beauty in the ocean, the fish and the whales and turtles and so many things, and swimming amongst trash.
Right.
And so when I decided to do a second row, it was for my own growth and to experience that beauty of the ocean again, and hopefully with a second pass integrate more and take a stand for clean oceans. So I decided to do a second row focused on raising funds to stop plastic from flowing to sea.
I love it. I love it not only from the social impact piece, but also from the metaphysical awareness of I am them and they are us, which ancient wisdom understands very well. Like they understand very well, I am the fire, I am the water, I am the air, I am the earth. And I started experiencing that personally in Vision Quest, a moment where I remember about on the third day I woke up and I started to really connect with the nature around me, the trees, and understand first that the forest that I was in had consciousness. And I knew it conceptually. I'd studied it. I read it. But I got to experience it and embody it and start connecting with it. That is a pretty condensed space I was in. You were in a condensed space in the vastness of the ocean. So there's one thing about you having a relationship with the boat and the little things around it, but the boat was in the vastness of the ocean, which is actually more space than land.
By far.
What was that like? And describe as best as you can for those who haven't experienced that kind of connection with the element of water, what that connection felt like for you and still feels like for you.
It changed regularly. And the nature of the first row and the second row were night and day. So at the end of the first row, I felt so deeply loved by the ocean.
Yeah.
And it really felt like, honestly, like a maternal love, like what a mother's love should be. And I felt like the ocean does nothing but support us all with climate regulation and so many ecological services that keep us alive every day. We're breathing air from the ocean right now.
That's right.
Half of the oxygen on Earth comes from the ocean. And what thanks do we give? We rip all the wildlife out and fill it with trash. And so at the end of the first row, I felt this super deep connection to the ocean. And then I came back here to Colorado. I needed to find water in every which way. And I spent the months after I came back here doing cold plunges in this tiny little creek by my house. Like I needed to be in the water every day. And on the other hand, when I went back and did Expedition 2, that was a process of putting on armor every day to survive. It was so indescribably difficult on so many dimensions. And in the first row, it felt like the ocean had my back, especially after I fixed the rowing seat and I kind of solved my inner doubts.
Right.
And in the second row, the ocean didn't care if I was there or not. It'd kill me the second I turned my back. And I had to be on guard all the time. And it's a fickle and powerful force, and one which deserves full respect.
Yeah.
And I'm still integrating that.
As a parent, my best relational analogy to this right here is going into those first 18 years of life, we will do anything for our kids. We are fully focused on them. Our job is to prepare them, get them resilient and able to go out into the real world. What it sounds like is your second trip, the maternal or paternal instinct of the ocean looked at it like, bro, you're 30. You don't have a job. You're coming back to me right now. And you want to live in my house?
You're going to pay a lot of rent.
You're going to pay a lot of rent, and you're going to actually be contributing here. You're going to be doing half of the chores in the house. Actually, maybe 100% of the chores in the house. And I'm going to decide in each individual moment whether or not you stay or go.
Fair analogy.
Yeah, seems pretty relevant. You're like, oh, you're back. We're just supposed to see you on, family vacations here. So you're in this experience on the second one. I want to dig in a little bit to that because part of the certainty and uncertainty factor from somebody who hasn't experienced what you have would say most of the variables would seem similar, which going into it, I'm sure you said, well, I've kind of got a hang for this now. I've done this for something, certain amount of time. And do you feel like the ocean kind of looked at that and said, oh yeah, it's not going to be anything like the first one. You make plans, the universe laughs.
There are a couple factors. One is, although it's one Pacific Ocean, the meteorological and sea state behaviors of different parts of ocean are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And from California to Hawaii is mostly a relatively calm area dominated by a high pressure system that runs the trade winds from the continent out to Hawaii.
Mm.
Once I got out into those trade winds, which took me a month to get out there, it was a battle. Once I got out there, the ocean had my back. Literally. It was helping me along.
And it pulled you along.
From Hawaii to Australia, those patterns are completely different. First, it's cutting across the trade winds. Then it's getting down to the intertropical convergence zone, this band of thick belt of cloud around the equator where there's just erratic storm behavior. Then once you cross the equator, counter currents, counter winds. Then it's the South Pacific where there are tropical storm risks and other types of things. Now you have islands and atolls and reefs to navigate around, shipping lanes, all these different factors that I didn't have to plan for in the first row. On top of that, it's a lot longer, naturally, so twice as far, actually.
Wow, okay.
And that just means the cumulative wear and tear from the sun, from the salt, from all these different aspects compound over time. And so, you know, there's the analogy, but really it was moving into a very different house in a very different neighborhood rather than coming home to the one that I grew up in.
Wow. So you're in this journey, and during this time, how did you deal with the fear, the loneliness, all the different mental spirals when, you know, you had nowhere to escape, right? Most people, when they're in a situation and they're processing these emotions, they can leave their house and go somewhere. They can turn on Netflix. They can intake a substance. What did you do in those moments?
It depended on the day. So in the first row, something funny happened. It's funny now.
Yeah.
It wasn't funny then. On day 3, the same day that big weather picked up, my iPhone factory reset in my pocket. Okay, now I still had my sat phones and means of communicating, but it was my primary phone with my music and audiobooks, photos of home, the things I would use to ground and recalibrate, etc. Gone. Brick. No resetting that. I had another phone with a little bit of music. But what that meant is I had to be really judicious about when I would play it because I'd get tired of it really quickly. So in the first row, when I found myself, for example, wanting to play music, I'd ask myself why. Why do I want to play it? It's not something we often ask ourselves. You're like, oh, I want to hear music today, or in this moment, you put it on. But I stopped and I'd ask myself, and often it was because I was scared or sad. And I'd say, well, how am I going to feel when this album is over? That feeling will still be there. Okay, well, then let me not play music. Let me sit with that experience right now. And I'm a type of person who likes to process emotion through movement. Right. So I sit and I row and I think. And that's one of the beautiful things about ocean rowing is it's a lot of time to think. And sometimes it's really difficult. But in our daily life, we have so little time to actually think.
That's right.
So I would sit on my rowing seat and typically row in the first row about 10 hours a day, maybe 12. The second row is closer to 14 hours a day. When I sit down on the seat at the start of the day, I ask myself, what do I want to think about? And I would lay out a menu. Do I want to think about my parents? Do I want to think about family? Do I want to think about friends? It was often people. Maybe it would be, I want to be creative and think about business ideas. Let me think about businesses. And I would lay out this menu, the food for thought menu, and I'd pick a dish. And you know what? If it's a can of worms that I'm opening up, I got the time, that's right. You know? And so that's one of the beautiful things about it is because there's no escape, it allowed me to look at things that are really hard. And that's one way it's helpful to see that this is not as much a running away from, but a running towards, because there's no looking away from the demons when you're sitting with nothing else to do.
That's powerful. And I think a lot of times when you're in those situations, you have your rhythm that you get into, and then you have moments where you need willpower. And I'm curious, what did the ocean teach you about rhythm versus willpower?
Well, what I'll say is there's also a while I'm thinking of the answer on the ocean, I first want to say that committing to something where there's no way out, willpower becomes irrelevant.
Right.
Like, willpower didn't get me through this. Willpower got me to the start line, right? But even that's not as much willpower, because I made these public declarations of what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take people's support, sponsorship from companies, donations from friends and family. They're all backing me now. This is more than just my personal quest. And so there's a high degree of social accountability that I built into the structure
Right.
before I hit the water. And then when I'm on the water, even with the social accountability aside, there's no turning back. There's no elegant way to bail. If I give up, the process of that is jumping on a passing vessel. Passing is relative, by the way. Could take a couple days. Board that boat, abandon mine, and where am I headed? Maybe the Philippines. I'm probably going to regret that decision. So it's not as much willpower, but there is a degree of presence and patience. And the ocean taught me that. That here we are in Colorado. You go for a hike in Colorado, you're following the trail. If it's a really difficult stretch, you might be looking up to see where the trail slackens, maybe where there's a summit. Maybe you're in the sun and you're looking for where that shade is, right? You're looking and scanning. What I realized on the ocean, that's useless. What you see is what you get.
Yeah.
So accept it. It might change in an hour or two, and sometimes changes come quickly, but more often or not, it'll change in a couple days or a week. And it might suck, but it's what we got.
That's right.
And so I think what it taught me was really patience and acceptance of what is, while bearing in mind that if you sit with it, it can slowly change, but only if you first accept it.
So taking this and back to the embodiment piece, and for others who may not take on such a interesting journey, the transformation process, I think, is a really fascinating one. For me, I dealt with transformation in the physical space, personally and professionally. And I always talked about, when it comes to transformation, there's some universal laws with regards to goals and deadlines and accountability and systems, and a really big why behind what you're doing, versus things just being theoretical. And for you, it sounds like you had all of those pieces in place. Now, as you're going through the process, you said, you know what, I'm at this place and I have this social accountability and I have this big goal and vision and I know what the finish line looks like. How did you handle the piece of, you said, I sat there and I realized there was no turning back, meaning like, I can't bail out on this. What was the purpose or the big why that pulled you in those moments to say, like, I can't turn back because why I did this in the first place? Or was it more fear driven?
It's just impractical.
Right.
It's like it's
Right.
completely impractical. There was a point in the second row from Hawaii to Australia, a month in, where I had some equipment failures. I spent like 36 hours awake. My steering system broke, and I spent 36 hours awake trying to guide the boat through super rough weather. Spent the night sitting down in the seat, not getting up once, trying to steer the boat. And at the end of that, was so worn out and so depleted that I just completely cracked. And the first row was catalyzed by my father's death, right? And between my first and second rows, my mother died, and I had a heart attack. And I headed out to sea for the second row, feeling really sensitive and raw. And when I just felt so broken down after this first month of the second row, I realized, or felt, I can't do this anymore. But I said, I rowed myself out here. I will row myself to the nearest land. Now, thankfully, the nearest land was 800 miles away, the Marshall Islands. So that gave me some time to rethink.
Nice.
So within a few days, I was like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to actually bail yet. And it's one of the benefits of the ocean is it allowed me to, okay, once I got some sleep and once I thought this over a little bit more, I could keep going. But it was really, it's this thing that I started doing in endurance sports, long before ocean rowing, was just asking myself, what if I went a little further? It's just that question. And it was really more of a, what if? What if I stuck it out a little longer? And it was that question that then I was like, okay, well, not the Marshall Islands, maybe the Solomon Islands, maybe. And eventually I did make it to that island called Australia.
I love it. I love it. And I love the parallels of this into leadership as well. Leadership, entrepreneurship. A lot of people listening at home are, high achieving, heart centered entrepreneurs. And I'm curious, you're digging into this long kind of middle part in the sea. And how does this mirror what you see leaders experiencing in their business and in their life?
Well, a couple of things, right? Leadership is known to be, at times, a very lonely experience. Mm-hmm. And it's a fallacy to see what I've done, these solo rows, and view them as solo efforts, right? It was very much a collective effort. Friends, family, sponsors, so many random people I've never met, right, would show up and help in some way or another. And so the first thing is realizing, yes, I'm alone in the boat, but there were so many people in that boat with me, right, emotionally and in so many ways. And so that's number one, is asking yourself who's in your boat with you. Mm-hmm. And the other piece is really navigating this uncertainty, right? We all have waves washing overboard in our life, and it just comes down to how we respond to them. And we have that in whatever business or domain you're working in. Mm-hmm. It's really a question of reorienting to these events that happen, and is there a way to keep showing up?
So you pushed through, you persevered in both of these cases. So what would you tell somebody who feels stuck, but they just can't justify stopping, and they're just doing this again, like, I'm not going to stop what I'm doing because it's my identity or because of fear?
If it's because of identity or fear, I think you're barking up the wrong tree.
That's right. It's time to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Look, knowing when to stop something is as important as knowing when to start. My first nonprofit that I spent years building right out of college was actually doing emergency medical education in Latin America. Tangent. But we helped start in Venezuela and Bolivia the first university-based EMT training programs.
Wow.
And it was a total bootstrap thing, dude. We're in our 20s. We're like no income, no salary. I was dog sitting, right? And doing random things to cover bills while doing this nonprofit work. After busting our tails for years to create these programs, we ended up getting an invitation to Nepal to help set up emergency training programs there. Seemed like the perfect win. It's what we've been looking for, a funder telling us, here you go. Here's like carte blanche to run your model to help create these university-based programs. And we realized we don't have the local intel. We don't have the language. We don't have the cultural capabilities, right? And we actually decided to shut down, right? We had achieved what we had set out to do in these two places, and what looked like the golden ticket was very tempting, but that was our actual moment to say, you know what, we wanted to put ourselves out of business in these first two places. So I bring that up just to say, walking away from something can be really the right thing for you, depending on the circumstances.
I love that. And I think a lot of times people can move in and start asking themselves, am I pushing, like forcing these things, or am I pacing myself? And you had to, again, like endurance sports, you had to master that balance of pushing and pacing while you're on this boat for an extended period of time. What did you learn about that difference between the two?
Some of those lessons were learned off the water, right? In total, I spent 197 days at sea. Mm-hmm. I spent 5 times that much preparing for these expeditions, right? The training and the fundraising and all these things. And in 2022, when I was getting ready to announce my second expedition, I was phenomenal shape, dude. I was jacked. Felt like best shape of my life. Landing these awesome sponsors. I got to go to Necker Island, meet Richard Branson, pitch him. Like, was on top of the world. And that's when, suddenly, unexpectedly, walking up a set of stairs, I got a heart attack at age 34. Right? I'm like, why me? I'd spent 10 years developing the most trusting relationship with my body, seen it do things with me that seemed impossible. Like, it was my foundation of how I oriented to the world, the trust in my body and myself, and that was shattered. And so it was a question of, like, forget of whether or not I could ever row across the ocean again. Can I walk? Right? And right now I can't walk for the first 3 months. And so the lesson around pacing, it's when you least expect it, when you might get the most powerful lesson around that.
Yeah, amazing. And since it doesn't make sense from a logical left brain mind why two things happened. One, why on day one your phone factory reset. And two, and I'm sure there's 100 more things, but two, why did a 34-year-old guy who's in world-class shape, eating super clean food, drinking distilled ocean water, like, had this heart attack? When you pull out the logic piece and you get out of your head and into your heart, why do you internally think these types of things were part of your journey?
I don't always have a great explanation for why, but I have I do a good job of trusting myself that I'll make the most of it. And being grateful even when it's a shitstorm.
Yep.
I am so grateful my phone died in the first row. It was so foundational to the experience that I ended up having, being completely present for 10 weeks. If I had music, I would have had a soundtrack to this experience, which just seems like so inane, but is so natural. That's what most of us would naturally do. And so I'm really stoked. I don't know if it's a spiritual intervention, but I accept it for what it is.
Right.
And the heart attack, I didn't accept that right away, man. I was pissed. Heartbroken, pissed, and to cap it off, 2 weeks after my heart attack is when my mom died. And now I'm in a spot where I can't let my heart rate elevate because that affects the heart's remodeling. In order for it to heal, I have to stay as calm as possible, which was as hard as ocean rowing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And as for why it happened, I don't have a great answer for that on a spiritual level, but I will say that because I had already begun working with a film team who were on board to make a doc film about the second row, it gave meaning to it. Because, I mean, when I went to the hospital, a friend met me there. I handed him my cell phone. And they got the 12 leads on me. They're pushing me into the cath lab. I handed him my cell phone. I said, start recording. Like, in the event of the heart attack, I was looking ahead to, like, this will make a good story.
Yes. I freaking love that. That is one of the things that I have trained myself to, is that in the speaking world, you call them a vignette, like it's a story. And this, in the documentary world, a little bit different, but the exact same concept. And it's that leaning into the moment where it's like, while you may not know the meaning behind the why, you do know that the movie's going to be a heck of a lot better for those chewing the popcorn, watching it at home. And we know that, I like to say that, hindsight's 20/20, but foresight can be pea soup fog. So to me, the most important part of all of this is that resilience balanced with surrender. How did you, within both of these journeys, like, have those moments of resilience and courage, and also surrender and shedding?
So first of all, when we talk about resilience, we often imagine a moment of someone being strong and courageous, but in fact, the experience of being resilient is kind of a shitty experience.
Yeah.
You're like, this sucks, but I'm doing it anyway.
That's right.
And sometimes you can reorient to being like, okay, I'm grateful for this opportunity. But most of the time, the process of being resilient is really difficult. It's like sandpaper on the skin. And so the resilience versus surrender really varied based on the conditions and what I was battling in the moment or navigating.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. After the first row, I wouldn't have used the word battle at all. It's really because of the second row that I even have that in the terminology.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still thinking on that one.
Well, I would say, again, from my observation of your experience, because if you're listening at home, I had the cool benefit of providing some nutrients for you on
Yes,
row
sir.
number one, which
Yes,
is pretty
sir.
awesome, as we still had the shake. And I've also watched the difference between these two journeys where, it's a much more seasoned experience having gone through number two, and then watched you then having to bring this in and embody it into, those next phases of your life. And for me, what I've observed is you had to bring everything back into this 3D experience of humanity. And that, to me, is probably the hardest part. It's like you're shown so much, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then, people talk about the mundane of the ocean and the certainty and like sometimes this day in, day out can feel like Groundhog Day and a little bit mundane.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that this has been something that you've had these massive experiences, but you still are going through day in, day out life, what are you doing with it in the sense of, are you creating like new visions, new things that create new enthusiasm? Or are you sort of sitting back and going, what's coming to me next? Like, are you listening or are you creating more?
Right now, it's much more of a listening. Yeah. The second row was something I survived.
Yeah.
And I did not get off that boat being like, more, please.
Yeah.
I did often, at times, recognize that the ocean is awesome. This place is even awesome, but visiting it in a rowboat is very silly.
Yeah.
And I would love to come back here one day in a sailboat with some friends. So, I started working on my sailing certifications.
Oh, nice.
And there are some things that I'm creating. My main focus right now is actually supporting someone else. I realized I learned a lot from 197 days alone at sea. It would be a shame for that to go to waste. So I'm coaching an entrepreneur who at age 56 is going to, just this coming April, as a 56-year-old, he's climbing in my boat and he's going to row from California down to mainland Mexico, 1,500 miles nonstop. He's raising funds for addiction recovery and mental health with a focus on men and fathers.
Wow.
He was actually a speaking client. I do keynote speaking. And he heard my talk and said, would you coach me? Would you help me do something like this? So I'm super stoked and grateful to be able to share what I've learned to someone who's incredibly coachable, beautiful, open heart, and a dog of a worker. So my main thing is supporting him on this expedition, which will be this coming spring. And after that is a listening for what's next.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what an experience to get to view it through that lens. That's it's going to be like you're on the boat with him without being on the boat with him in a whole new kind of way.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So if someone's listening right now and they feel like, man, I'm just in the middle of this long stretch of life, which you've, in many cases, mastered now twice. So what is one thing you'd want them to stop fighting, or one thing you'd invite them to maybe start trusting more?
What I found in my experience is, speaking of this process of resilience and grit, what helped me when I didn't love what I was doing was falling in love with why I was doing it.
Yeah.
So much of preparing for an ocean row is like sending emails. It's a lot of time on the computer. I don't feel like doing this. I want to be outside. And if I could get clear on, okay, what am I actually, like, why am I doing this? And that can be a helpful tool to recalibrate and reorient through the mundane, the really boring stuff that you don't want to show up for. If you can fall in love with why you're doing it, then it can feel a little bit easier.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to drop in a couple quick ones, and I just want this one to come from that mind that was at the sea that was put totally to sleep. So morning or night at sea, what's better?
Morning.
Discipline or devotion?
Depends on the row, but I'm going to go with discipline after row 2.
Hardest emotion to sit with?
Anger.
Oof. One belief the ocean permanently erased?
There are limits to what we can accomplish.
There are limits to what we can accomplish. Expand on that.
Erased. Permanently erased?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's limits to what we can accomplish. What was the big breakthrough on that one for you? Was that on row 1 or row 2? Or both?
I'd say both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got double the length and a not happy mom that wanted to send you off, not have her live in your house anymore. That's pretty darn amazing. Incredible. So if somebody's inspired, and let's say, hey, maybe they don't want to hop in the boat and have you coach them, but they want to follow your journey and see what's next, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Visit tezsteinberg.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can find me on socials at Tez Steinberg. And follow CB Rose, because that's my main focus the next 6 months, is this next expedition, cbrose.com.
cbrose.com. Perfect. We'll add all those in the show notes. And I'll leave you with what is one question that you'd want to ask me based on this life experience?
If you were your own parent and you're relating to yourself as a child, how would you guide yourself through your parents' death? Through your
Yeah, that's a big one. And for me, my human experience, 25 years of coaching, I've had to have this huge capacity to be able to handle so many clients' massive tragedies, from loss of children, loss of parents, you name it. And the only way I've been able to handle that is to go through massive amounts of that myself.
To be able to hold that.
And so what I've leaned into as far as my certainty is accepting the unknowingness of what happens when this stops, this consciousness stops in the physical form, but also not having the hubris to think that Earth School is it, and having this awareness of, having been through my own death, I've had a few near-death experiences, having been through my own death, an awareness that there is something consciousness-wise that is so much bigger and so much greater and so much more incredible than just this limited use, which we know scientifically is extremely limited use of these 5 senses here, right? Tiny little bit of vision that the human has, the tiny little bit of sound that we can hear, the tiny little bit that we can feel. And for me, I realize the sadness of all those types of things when people die, when people leave, when they have tragedy. We feel brokenhearted. I really think that it's not a brokenheartedness. It's a we're in our head about it versus in our heart. Because when we come back to our heart and we're centered and we're balanced and we're at peace, we get this wide awareness that there is this interconnectedness, which is the same thing that you felt on the ocean. And it's the same thing that I know when I get out of my head and into my heart and get calm, is that they've never left. They just aren't in the physical form.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that wisdom.
Well, man, thank you for coming on today. This was a blast. I'm excited for the next one. It may literally be talking about your experience on a all-inclusive cruise versus a rowboat where you're self-sufficient. And if anybody has earned that right to sit back and stuff their face with an all-inclusive, it's you, my friend.
I don't think you'll find me there, but I appreciate the tip. Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it.